It was a dark summer's night, and the streetlights had just turned off. I was sat in my living room watching the new episodes of Rick and Morty that had just been released on ITV. As I sat there enjoying the show, I started to hear a distant noise I couldn't quite make out. I listened carefully to see if I could make sense of what it was. I got up to try and get closer to the noise only to realize it was coming from outside. I just shrugged it off as there was always wild animals raiding bins and things at this sort of time and went back to watching my show. It was only when it became louder I started to become more concerned. I decided to have a peek out the window to see what all the racket was about, but was unable to see much in the darkness of the night. As I went to sit back down, I started to hear frantic footsteps with gasps and coughs coming to what seemed to be my front door. As I rushed back to the window to take a look, a glare of light shone through the window, blinding my eyes. As the initial dazzle had died down, and thanks to the front porch light that had just turned on, I could make out a human figure at my door. It was a girl. She was about 5'5", light brown hair, with bright blue eyes, and was completely covered in blood. I ducked down to make sure she didn't see me. I was unsure of the girl's motives at this time. She began to frantically scream and slam on the door, begging me to let her in. I was scared. I didn't know this girl, nor had I ever seen her before. It was the way she was covered in blood that scared me the most. She persistently continued to bang and scream at my front door. I could hear the fear in her voice. I was unsure whether to help her. Thoughts were flooding my mind, going through every single bad scenario that I could think of. I then had an urge to slowly crawl over to the door. So I did. As I got there, I shouted, "Who are you?" in the bravest voice I could. She was in too much of a panic for me to properly understand what she was saying, but it sounded like she was trying to say someone was after her. With the thought of being responsible for this girl's death, I decided to help her out and open the door so she could come inside. The girl barged in, knocking me to the ground as she did. I frantically got back to my feet to close and lock the door in fear that the person after her would also barge through any second. As I turned back around to see where the girl had gone, she was nowhere to be seen. I could hear quite sobbing, though, coming from the bathroom, so I slowly made my way over there. As I turned the corner, I could see her curled up in a ball in the corner. I asked again who she was, but she didn't even raise her head. I was convinced she was about to kill me. She then looked up and said, "Please don't let him get me, please, please." I sat down next to her and wrapped my arms around her in an attempt to try and ease the fear she was feeling. I asked who was after her, and she said she didn't know. To try and better understand the situation, I asked why they was after her. But before she could reply, I saw a movement through the window in the bathroom and snapped my head round to have a look. I couldn't see anything due to the light being on in the bathroom, so all I could see was my own reflection. I got up and I pressed my head right up against the window, only to be met with a pair of eyes staring straight into mine. With a panic, I leapt back from the window and out of the room. As I exited the bathroom, I heard the shattering of glass, and then silence. I was scared more than ever. I was unsure if this thing's eyes that I had just stared into was inside the house or not. As I stood there in the hallway, the power suddenly went out, and the house was filled with complete darkness. My heart started to beat faster and faster to the point where I could hear it echoing in the corridor. I slowly started to tiptoe towards the front door, making as little noise as possible. As I got close, though, I made my break and sprint as fast as I could out of my house onto the pitch-black street. As I was far enough away to feel somewhat safe, I turned to look at my house, only to see a figure standing at the door, with those same eyes I had just seen moments before. Without hesitation, I ran, as fast as my legs could carry me down the street. I began shouting and banging on the door of every house I passed, hoping at least one person would let me into the safety of their home. As I was running, I had an overwhelming emotion of finally understanding how the girl had felt. I continued to run while occasionally looking over my shoulder to see if I was being followed. As I was running, I saw a house with a light on inside, and made my way towards it in the hope someone would answer the door. As I was banging and screaming, the door opened to find a large male around 6'5" standing directly in front of me. I tried to explain the best I could what had happened, and he let me inside. He guided me to what looked like his kitchen, and handed me a glass of water, while trying to tell me that I was safe now he was there. Suddenly, there was a quiet tapping at the front door, and the man told me to stay seated where I was while he went to check it out. I begged him not to, telling him it was the guy after me, but he didn't listen. As he went towards the door, the tapping stopped. My eyes were fixated on him. I was praying nothing bad was going to happen. He paused by the door for a few seconds before swinging it open with force, only for there to be nothing there. As he closed the door, I felt relieved and glanced over at the window in the kitchen. There stood the figure. I froze in fear with my eyes staring directly into his. The figure slowly lifted his hand and pointed at me, followed by the gesture one would do to signify the cutting of someone's neck. He then descended back into the darkness. I was still frozen in place, unsure what to do. I finally unfroze and my eyes darted around the room in search for the man that let me into his house. I couldn't see him anywhere. Suddenly, the window in the kitchen shattered, and something resembling a human came through. I didn't waste a second and fled to the door in the belief the killer was hot on my heels. I swung the door open only to find myself face to face with the guy. In a desperate attempt of disbelief that my mind was playing tricks on me, I looked back towards the kitchen where I had thought he was, only to see the girl that I had tried to help, dead on the floor. He had threw the body through the window as a distraction to lure me out. It had worked. I felt a sharp pain into my stomach area. I was too scared to look down to see what had happened, so I just stared into his dark black eyes that showed nothing but evil inside. I quickly lost consciousness after that. I came to, not long after, to see the 6'5" guy banging on the door of the neighbors across the street. There was a huge blood trail to where he was from his own front door. I could see the killer waiting in the shadows, ready for its next victim to open the door.